Welcome back, everyone, to Unplugged Headlines.
Yeah, glad to be back.
We are ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always exciting to see what we uncover.
This is episode 25, and we're going to be focusing on a topic that I think a lot of our listeners, especially those who are in businesses that are, rapidly scaling or operating in that financial space, are going to find really relevant.
Yeah, I think it's something that's it's almost like an invisible tax that people don't even realize they're paying.
Exactly, and that's a perfect way to put it. The blog post that we're going to be looking at today is titled "The $6.7 Million Mistake You Don't Have to Make."
Ooh, that's a catchy title.
It is, right. And it really gets to the heart of how these systems that we rely on, especially, when it comes to compliance, can actually end up costing businesses huge amounts of money and opportunities.
I think a lot of us have felt that pain, right? Where you're excited about some new opportunity, maybe a new market you want to enter, or a new payment method you want to accept, or a new banking service you want to integrate with.
You've got the strategy, you see the market demand, and then you hit this wall.
Yeah, you hit that wall of your own infrastructure. Like, oh, wait, how are we actually going to do this?
And the blog post gives some great examples of, the kinds of things that can trip you up, like, say, you need to integrate with a bunch of different banking partners.
Right, and each one has their own systems, their own APIs, their own security protocols.
And you're essentially rebuilding your compliance setup every single time.
Exactly. Or imagine, you want to expand into a new country.
Oh, new jurisdiction, new set of rules.
And suddenly you realize, oh, wow, we have to start almost from scratch in terms of compliance.
And the blog post talks about, some companies even having entire teams dedicated just to reconciling data across these different platforms.
Just to make sense of all the information coming from these different sources.
Yeah, just to try and get a clear picture of what's going on.
Mm.
And I think, stepping back for a moment, it's important to really understand the impact of these, seemingly small operational hurdles.
Because they're not small, are they?
No, not at all. I mean, you miss out on key market opportunities. Think of a payment platform that's not ready for, say, a big holiday shopping season.
Right, you miss that peak season, and that's potentially huge revenue lost.
Your time to market just stretches out, which means, your competitors have more time to catch up or even get ahead.
You lose that first mover advantage.
And then there are these budget overruns that just, can completely throw off your plans for future growth.
You're suddenly spending way more than you anticipated just trying to keep all these systems running.
And this is what the blog post refers to as the fragmentation tax. It's this, like you said, invisible drain on your resources.
It's almost insidious because you don't always see it right away.
And what's really powerful about this blog is they actually put some numbers to this.
I'll quantify it, yeah.
They mention that 50 to 60% of engineering resources can be spent just maintaining these connections between all these different systems.
Think about that. That's more than half of your technical talent not focused on building new things or improving your core offering.
It's just keeping the lights on, so to speak.
Keeping the pipes connected, the data flowing.
And then they talk about how 10 to 15% of operational budgets can be eaten up by verification processes alone.
Making sure everything is accurate and compliant across all these different platforms.
It's a huge chunk of your budget going towards just making sure things are working as they should.
It's really highlighting how much inefficiency is built into this fragmented approach.
And the timelines, oh my goodness, the timelines. They talk about 6 to 9 months to launch new capabilities that ideally should take, a few weeks.
In today's fast-paced world, that's an eternity.
It's like the market's moved on by the time you're finally ready.
And then to have entire teams just for reconciliation, that really drives home the point of how deep this problem runs.
So it's like innovation is being held hostage by these, complex and disconnected systems.
And it's interesting, we often focus on banking and payments infrastructure when you talk about this.
Right. Those are the obvious ones.
But the blog rightly points out that regulatory onboarding, that whole process, is a huge area of fragmentation that often gets overlooked.
It's not just about connecting to the financial institutions. It's about making sure you and your customers meet all the regulatory requirements.
And those requirements can vary widely depending on the industry, the jurisdiction, the type of service you're offering.
It's a complex landscape.
And they break down this compliance onboarding lifecycle into 4 main stages.
Right. You've got identity management, which is basically, making sure you know who you're dealing with.
Verifying their identity.
Then there's document management, which is all the secure exchange and validation of, the necessary paperwork.
Proof of address, things like that.
Then you've got transaction monitoring, which is, keeping an eye out for things like money laundering, fraud, those kinds of activities.
AML, as it's often called, anti-money laundering.
And then finally, ongoing compliance, which is all those continuous risk assessments and reporting that you need to do.
So it's a pretty standard process across regulated industries. But what's interesting is that companies often approach each stage with a completely separate tool.
It's like a patchwork quilt of solutions.
Exactly. You might have one vendor for KYC checks, another for KYB verification, a different one for AML monitoring, another for secure document signing.
And then another one for ongoing compliance checks.
So you end up with this Frankenstein system where nothing really talks to each other effectively.
And the blog uses this really striking example to illustrate the dangers of this.
Yeah, I remember this example.
Imagine a customer who logs in from, say, the U.S., uploads a document from, I don't know, Peru, and then makes a transaction in Hong Kong.
All within a short period of time.
And each of those actions is being seen by a different system in isolation.
The identity verification system might flag the unusual login location.
But it has no idea about the document or the transaction.
And the document management system is just processing the paperwork.
It doesn't know where the user logged in from or what they're doing with their account.
And the AML system might flag the transaction as potentially suspicious.
But it's missing the context of the user's identity and where that document came from.
So you end up with these partial glimpses of activity.
But no complete picture of the risk.
And that's how things slip through the cracks.
And as the blog emphasizes, this can lead to some pretty serious consequences.
Regulatory fines, reputational damage, even unwittingly facilitating illegal activities.
It's a huge liability.
And, it's important to note that this fragmentation wasn't some intentional strategy.
It just kind of happened.
It's more like an evolutionary outcome.
Banks built their own closed systems. Payment providers focused on their specific rails. Compliance regulations developed, somewhat independently.
It's like everyone was building their own specialized tool for their specific job.
And now we're trying to duct tape it all together.
And the blog talks about this best-of-breed mentality in compliance, where companies think, okay, we need the best KYC platform, the best AML software.
Like, if we get the best of everything, we'll have the best overall compliance outcome.
But as they point out, this can actually backfire.
It creates all these new problems.
You have trouble reconciling data across all these different systems.
Your audit trails become weaker because information isn't flowing seamlessly.
And then you have the added complexity of managing sensitive data across multiple vendors.
Which is a huge privacy and security concern.
And one of the biggest downstream effects of this fragmentation is the reliance on manual review.
Because when your systems can't talk to each other, humans have to step in and figure things out.
And that's expensive.
Really expensive.
You get delays in revenue recognition because transactions are stuck in compliance queues waiting for manual checks.
You need bigger operations teams to handle the sheer volume of manual cases.
And you lose the opportunity cost of those skilled team members who could be focused on growth initiatives.
And this brings us to the $6.7 million mistake.
The title of the blog post.
They break down the financial impact of this manual intervention using a pretty clear formula.
They look at the percentage of new clients that require manual review,
The total number of new clients you acquire each month,
the additional time that manual review adds to the onboarding process.
and then the average annual revenue you get from each client.
And they use a pretty standard scenario, where maybe 70% of new clients need some manual intervention.
Which adds an extra 5 weeks to the onboarding.
With an average client revenue of $100,000.
And say you get 100 new clients a month.
And they arrive at that number, $6.7 million in delayed revenue every year.
Which is pretty shocking when you think about it.
It really brings home the financial reality of these inefficiencies.
And they also talk about a churn scenario.
Which is the idea that, if you make new clients wait weeks longer than they expect,
Because of these manual processes,
some of them are going to get frustrated and go somewhere else.
they estimate that this churn could be anywhere from 5 to 10% of those delayed clients.
Which is millions more in lost revenue.
And they contrast these costs with the potential savings of having a more integrated system,
Like they use the example of Ahrvo Comply
where you drastically reduce the need for manual intervention.
and shorten the onboarding time.
And the savings are huge.
It really makes a strong case for a more unified approach.
But the blog goes even further and says, even if you have better compliance tools,
It's not just about the individual tools.
it's about the whole system.
The fact that you're dealing with multiple disconnected financial partners.
Every time you want to integrate with a new bank, a new payment processor,
You have to go through this whole rigmarole again.
separate compliance checks, custom integrations, commercial reviews.
It's a huge time suck,
And they introduced this concept of time to launch, or TTR.
which is basically how long it takes you to get a new product or service up and running.
And they have a formula for that, too.
It takes into account how many financial partners you need to onboard with,
How long compliance takes with each one,
how long integration takes.
and how long it takes to navigate the commercial agreements.
And they give this example where, if you need to onboard with 4 different financial providers,
Even being optimistic, you're looking at 28 weeks
which is more than half a year.
just to get your offering launched.
And that's a best case scenario.
Realistically, it could be much longer.
And so the blog proposes this radical idea
A completely different paradigm.
where your business identity is verified once.
And then you can use that verification across the entire financial ecosystem.
They call it the Portable Identity Gateway.
It's like, imagine having a passport for the financial world.
You get verified once, and then you can move freely.
You don't have to keep proving who you are over and over again.
And the blog highlights 4 key capabilities that this kind of unified infrastructure enables,
First, you have one business onboarding.
where you go through a single verification process.
And then you have access to a whole network of financial partners.
That's like one and done.
Then you have one integration.
A single point of connection for all your banking, payments, and compliance needs.
No more building custom integrations for every single partner,
Then you have one financial marketplace.
where you can discover and connect with all sorts of financial service providers in one place.
It's like a one-stop shop for all your financial needs.
And finally, you have complete control.
You decide what information you share and who you share it with.
You're not at the mercy of these fragmented systems.
And it's important to understand that this isn't just about adding another layer of software on top of the existing mess.
This is about rethinking the whole foundation.
A fundamental shift in how we approach financial infrastructure and compliance.
And the blog goes on to detail 5 key business transformations that become possible with this kind of unified infrastructure.
So let's dive into those.
The first one is market expansion without friction.
You can enter new regions much faster because you're not starting from scratch every time.
Weeks instead of months.
The second one is compliance as a revenue center, not a cost.
Because with this portable compliance credential, compliance becomes so much more efficient.
It could even become a source of revenue for some businesses.
Then there's radical acceleration of product launches.
You can launch new products and services in weeks instead of months.
Because you're not bogged down by integrations and compliance hurdles.
Then there's unified data, finally becomes a reality,
All your customer and transaction data is in one place.
which makes reconciliation, risk management, and reporting much easier.
And finally, sustainable competitive advantage.
You can focus on innovation and customer value instead of just trying to keep the lights on.
You're not constantly playing catch-up.
And they give some real-world examples of companies that are already benefiting from this.
Like this hospitality payment platform that launched a whole suite of new payment options in just 30 days.
Or this APAC-based payments provider that expanded into the US and Europe incredibly quickly.
Or this Latin American financial institution that streamlined their onboarding process with U.S. banks.
It's not just theory, it's actually happening.
So, to sum up, the blog post really drives home the point that fragmented financial infrastructure, especially when it comes to compliance, is costing businesses a lot of money.
It's limiting their growth, it's stifling their innovation.
But there is an alternative.
A unified approach that can turn compliance from a bottleneck into a growth engine.
And that's a powerful idea.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And I think it's a question worth asking ourselves, as business leaders.
How is our current infrastructure holding us back?
What could we achieve if we weren't constantly fighting these battles?
What ambitious goals could we set if those hidden costs were no longer a barrier?
It's something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time.
See you then.